The wind screamed through the forest like a wounded beast, driving curtains of snow between the black trunks of ancient pines. Night was descending quickly, swallowing the last traces of daylight beneath a sky heavy with storm clouds. Few travelers would have dared venture into the wilderness on such a night, yet one frightened young woman struggled through the drifts with nowhere else to go. Could barely feel her feet. Her thin dress, never meant for winter weather, clung to her shivering body. Snowflakes gathered in her dark hair and melted against her pale skin. Every breath burned her lungs. Every step felt heavier than the last. Still, she forced herself forward. Going back was not an option. The memory of her uncle's furious voice echoed in her mind. Worthless, burden, ungrateful girl. Those words had followed her for years, becoming chains she carried even when no one spoke them aloud. After her parents died when she was still a child, her uncle and aunt had taken her into their home. At first, she had believed they cared for her. That illusion vanished quickly. She became a servant rather than family, working from dawn until midnight while enduring endless criticism. Nothing she did was ever enough. If she worked hard, they demanded more. If she remained silent, they accused her of arrogance. If she smiled, they called her foolish. Over time, stopped believing she deserved kindness at all. A sudden crack of a branch behind her sent panic racing through her chest. She spun around. Nothing. Only darkness and swirling snow. Yet fear urged her onward. Earlier that afternoon, she had overheard a conversation that changed everything. Her uncle had arranged to marry her to an aging merchant twice her age in exchange for money. He had spoken about the arrangement as though selling livestock. That was the moment she ran. Now she was alone in a frozen forest with no destination and little hope. A fierce gust nearly knocked her down. Stumbled forward several steps before collapsing onto her knees. Tears mixed with melting snow on her cheeks. For the first time since leaving, doubt crept into her thoughts. Perhaps she should have stayed. Perhaps escape had been foolish. Perhaps she truly was incapable of surviving on her own. The storm answered with another violent blast of wind. Then she heard something. Horse hooves. Faint at first. Then growing louder. Terror surged through her. Had her uncle sent someone after her? Desperate to hide, she hurried toward a fallen log half buried beneath snow. She squeezed behind it, curling into herself as the sound approached. The rider emerged through the storm like a figure from legend. A massive black horse pushed through the drifting snow with steady determination. Its rider sat tall in the saddle, wrapped in a dark cloak lined with fur. Even through the blizzard, authority surrounded him. Held her breath. The horse slowed, then stopped. The rider turned his head, straight toward her hiding place. Her heart nearly stopped. For several seconds, neither moved. Finally, the man dismounted. His boots crunched through the snow as he approached. "Who is there?" he called. His voice was calm, deep, and commanding. Remained silent. "I can see you." Fear tightened her throat. The stranger stepped closer. When he reached the fallen log, his expression changed. Not to anger, to concern. A pair of striking gray eyes studied her carefully. "You'll freeze to death if you stay here." Stared at him. He appeared to be around 30, perhaps a little older. Snow dusted his dark hair. His features were strong and refined, carrying the confidence of someone accustomed to responsibility. Yet there was kindness in his gaze. That confused her more than anything. Kindness usually came with conditions. "What do you want?" she whispered. The man seemed surprised. "To help you." She almost laughed. No one had ever said those words without expecting something in return. "I don't need help." The statement was clearly unconvincing. Her teeth were chattering. Her hands trembled violently. The stranger glanced at her worn shoes and threadbare clothing. "You're freezing." "I'll manage." "You won't." The certainty in his voice unsettled her. For a moment, silence stretched between them. Then he removed his cloak. Before she could protest, he draped the heavy garment around her shoulders. Warmth immediately surrounded her. Blinked in surprise. The cloak carried traces of cedar wood and winter air. The stranger stepped back, allowing her space. "Who are you?" she asked. "Alexander Blackwood." Recognition flashed across her face. Even isolated villages knew the name. Duke Alexander Blackwood, one of the kingdom's most respected nobles. a man known for fairness rather than cruelty. She lowered her gaze quickly. People like him existed in a different world. A world far beyond her reach. "You know my name," he observed. Everyone knew his name. The Duke studied her quietly. "And yours?" He repeated it softly, as if committing it to memory. The strange gesture made her heartbeat stumble. Alexander noticed immediately how exhausted she looked. Beneath the dirt and exhaustion, he could see remarkable features. Her eyes were bright despite fear. Her face possessed a natural elegance untouched by vanity. Yet she seemed entirely unaware of it. Years of hardship had convinced her she was invisible. Something about that realization troubled him. "Where is your family?" he asked. The question cast a shadow across her expression. "I have none." The answer carried enough pain to explain everything. Alexander did not press further. The storm intensified around them. Snow swirled through the trees with renewed fury. "We need to leave." Hesitated. Trusting anyone felt dangerous. Trusting a powerful duke felt impossible. But remaining here meant certain death. Alexander extended his hand. Not demanding, simply offering. For several seconds she stared at it. Then she placed her trembling fingers in his. The contact was brief, yet something unexpected passed between them. Neither understood it. Alexander guided her toward his horse. Once mounted, they began the journey through the storm. Swayed with exhaustion, several times she nearly slipped. Finally, Alexander steadied her. "You should rest." "I'm fine. You can barely keep your eyes open." She wanted to argue. Instead, darkness crept across her vision. The next thing she knew, strong arms caught her as she lost consciousness. Alexander frowned. She weighed almost nothing. Far too light. As the horse carried them toward Blackwood Manor, he found himself thinking about the frightened woman he had discovered behind a fallen log. Most people sought advantage when meeting someone of his position. Had only looked terrified. That alone made her different. Hours later, the towering lights of Blackwood Manor emerged through the storm. Servants hurried outside as the Duke arrived. They froze in surprise at the sight of the unconscious young woman wrapped in his cloak. Alexander dismounted carefully and lifted into his arms. As her eyes fluttered open, she looked up at him with confusion. "We're here," he said. "Why?" she murmured weakly. "Because you needed somewhere safe." For the first time in years, felt the faintest spark of security. Alexander carried her toward the entrance. Before crossing the threshold, he spoke quietly. "I'll take you home, but not as my Duchess." He intended the statement as reassurance. A promise that she owed him nothing. Yet the words lingered strangely between them. Inside the grand hall, servants rushed forward. Among them stood Mrs., the elderly housekeeper who had served the Blackwood family for decades. As she approached, her gaze fell upon a silver locket resting against the young woman's neck. The old woman's face suddenly lost all color. Her eyes widened with shock. She stepped closer, staring at the delicate engraving on its surface. A trembling whisper escaped her lips. "Impossible." Alexander turned toward her. "What is it?" Mrs. could not look away from the locket. Her voice shook. "Your Grace, she cannot be." The storm raged outside the manor walls as an uneasy silence filled the hall. Then the housekeeper uttered words that made Alexander's blood run cold. "She bears the locket of the child who vanished 20 years ago." The words hung in the grand hall long after Mrs. spoke them. Alexander stared at the elderly housekeeper, searching her face for an explanation. "What child?" he asked. Mrs. swallowed hard before lowering her voice. 20 years ago, your late mother often visited a dear friend who lived in the northern countryside. That family had a little daughter. One winter, after a terrible accident, the child disappeared. No one ever found her." Her eyes returned to his locket. "I remember this piece. Lady Blackwood commissioned it as a gift." Touched the silver pendant instinctively. The locket was one of the few possessions she had inherited from her parents. She had never known its significance. Alexander looked between them. "You believe is that child?" "I don't know," Mrs. admitted, "but I know I have seen that locket before." The mystery remained unresolved, yet the conversation planted a seed of curiosity that lingered in everyone's mind. For now, however, some immediate needs demanded attention. Mrs. personally escorted her to a warm bedroom overlooking the snow-covered gardens. The room seemed larger than the cottage where her uncle lived. Soft blankets covered the bed. A fire crackled in the hearth. Fresh flowers rested beside the window, stood motionless near the doorway. She was afraid to touch anything. Her entire life had taught her that comfort belonged to other people. Mrs. noticed her hesitation. "You are safe here, dear." The simple words nearly brought tears to eyes. Nobody had called her dear in years. That night she slept more deeply than she could remember. For the first time, she did not wake to shouting voices or impossible demands. When morning arrived, sunlight reflected across the snow outside, transforming the estate into a glittering winter landscape. Cautiously began adjusting to life at Blackwood Manor. Days passed, then weeks. The servants quickly grew fond of her. Unlike many guests, she never treated them as invisible. She thanked them for every kindness. She listened when they spoke. She remembered their names. Her genuine warmth made an impression throughout the household. Whenever she noticed someone struggling, she offered help without being asked. If a maid carried too many linens, assisted. If a stable boy injured his hand, she helped bandage it. If a cook appeared overwhelmed, she volunteered in the kitchen. Years of hardship had made her compassionate rather than bitter. Alexander observed these moments from a distance. At first, he told himself his interest was simple responsibility. After all, he had rescued her. Ensuring her comfort was only natural. Yet he found himself noticing details he should not have noticed. The way her eyes brightened when she laughed. The patience she showed children from nearby villages. The quiet determination hidden beneath her gentle nature. One afternoon, he discovered her feeding an injured bird near the gardens. The small creature perched calmly in her hands. Most people would have ignored it. Had spent hours caring for it. "You're very persistent," Alexander remarked. She looked up, startled by his sudden appearance. "The poor thing was frightened. So were you when I found you." A faint smile touched her lips. "Perhaps that is why I understood it." The answer remained with Alexander long after the conversation ended. Meanwhile, Mrs. continued investigating the mystery surrounding the locket. Old records were examined. Letters were uncovered. Memories long forgotten resurfaced. Gradually, pieces of the past began fitting together. Evidence suggested that parents had indeed known Alexander's mother. They had once shared a close friendship. The revelation astonished. Her parents had rarely spoken about their lives before her birth. Now she discovered connections she never imagined existed. For the first time, she felt as though her history contained more than pain. As winter deepened, her confidence slowly blossomed. Living at the manor exposed her to a truth she had never considered. People reacted to her differently than her relatives had. Visitors complimented her grace. Servants admired her kindness. Even strangers seemed drawn to her presence. At first, she assumed they were merely being polite. Eventually, she realized they were sincere. The cruel words she had heard throughout childhood had been lies. She was not worthless. She was not unattractive. She was not unwanted. The discovery transformed her from within. Her posture straightened. Her voice grew stronger. Hope began replacing fear. Alexander witnessed every change. What unsettled him most was how much her happiness mattered to him. He looked forward to their conversations. He found excuses to spend time near her. Sometimes they walked through the gardens together. Sometimes they sat beside the library fireplace discussing books and dreams. The friendship between them deepened naturally. Yet neither spoke openly about the emotions growing beneath the surface. Alexander believed the difference in their positions made romance impossible. Believed someone as remarkable as the Duke could never love a woman like her. Both remained silent. Then trouble arrived. One snowy afternoon, a carriage stopped before the manor. The moment saw the passenger step out, all warmth vanished from her face. Her uncle. The man entered with forced politeness and false concern. He claimed he had searched desperately for his missing niece. He described himself as a worried guardian. Knew every word was a lie. Alexander listened carefully as the man spoke. At first, the Duke remained skeptical. Then's uncle introduced a more dangerous accusation. He suggested that it deliberately sought Alexander's attention, that she hoped to secure wealth through manipulation, that her kindness was merely an act. The allegations were outrageous, yet rumors rarely required truth to spread. Within days, whispers began circulating among visiting nobles. Some questioned motives, others viewed her with suspicion. The gossip hurt more than she expected. After finally finding acceptance, she faced judgment once again. The situation worsened when Lady Beatrice arrived at the manor. Beautiful, wealthy, and ambitious, she had long hoped to marry Alexander. The growing bond between the Duke and threatened those plans. Rather than confront the problem honestly, she chose deception. Lady Beatrice quietly encouraged the rumors. She exaggerated every misunderstanding. She twisted innocent events into evidence supporting the accusations. Whenever possible, she painted as calculating and dishonest. The campaign gradually affected even Alexander. He wanted to trust. Every instinct urged him to believe in her. Yet constant rumors created doubt. Questions began creeping into his thoughts. Questions he hated. Noticed the change immediately. The Duke, who once looked at her with certainty, now seemed conflicted. His smiles became less frequent. His conversations grew shorter. The distance between them widened. One evening, she found him standing alone in the library. The firelight cast long shadows across the room. Neither spoke at first. Finally gathered her courage. "Do you believe them?" Alexander looked away. The hesitation hurt more than any accusation. "I don't know what to believe." Pain flashed across her face. After everything they had shared, those words felt like a betrayal. She had trusted him more than anyone. She had allowed herself to hope. Now that hope trembled on the edge of collapse. Alexander struggled with his own emotions. Part of him wanted to dismiss every rumor immediately. Another part feared making a mistake. His uncertainty trapped him between reason and feeling. Stabbed closer. Tears shimmered in her eyes, though her voice remained steady. "You rescued me when nobody else would." Alexander remained silent. "You gave me a home when I had nowhere to go." Still he said nothing. "You saw who I was before anyone else did." The silence continued. At last she asked the question that mattered most. "If you truly know me, why do you doubt me?" The words struck with devastating force. Alexander searched for an answer. None came. His silence became the answer itself. Stared at him for several heartbreaking seconds. Then she nodded slowly. Not with anger. With disappointment. That expression wounded him more deeply than any accusation ever could. Without another word, she turned and left the library. Alexander remained alone beside the fire. A growing sense of dread settled over him. He knew something important had broken between them. Yet pride and confusion prevented him from following. Outside, snow began falling once more. The storm continued through the night. When morning arrived, servants discovered his room empty. Her belongings were gone. Only the silver locket remained absent with her. The woman who had transformed Blackwood Manor with kindness had vanished, leaving behind a silence that felt colder than the winter itself. The emptiness left behind revealed a truth Alexander could no longer ignore. Blackwood Manor had not merely housed her. It had changed because of her. The halls seemed quieter. The servants spoke less. Even the warmth of the great fireplaces felt diminished. For several days, Alexander convinced himself she would return once her emotions settled. Yet each passing morning brought only disappointment. Her chair remained empty at breakfast. Her laughter no longer drifted through the gardens. The absence followed him everywhere. One evening, Mrs. entered his study carrying a collection of old letters. The housekeeper's expression was grave. "I have finished my investigation." Alexander looked up immediately. "What did you discover?" Mrs. placed the documents on his desk. "The truth." Over the next hour, she revealed everything. The letters proved that his parents had indeed been close friends of Alexander's mother. More importantly, they contained evidence exposing the lies that had poisoned his reputation. Her uncle had forged stories for years to gain sympathy and financial advantage. Several witnesses confirmed his cruelty. Additional correspondence revealed that his parents had entrusted the silver locket to their daughter before their deaths. Nothing connected her to deception. Everything pointed toward honesty. As Alexander absorbed the evidence, shame settled heavily upon him. He had known his character. He had witnessed her kindness. He had seen her integrity countless times. Yet when others questioned her loyalty, he allowed doubt to enter his heart. Mrs. studied him carefully. "Do you understand now?" Alexander closed his eyes. "Yes." "You did not lose her because of rumors." The words struck with painful accuracy. "You lost her because you stopped trusting her." After the housekeeper departed, Alexander remained alone for hours. Memories flooded his mind. Helping injured animals, comforting frightened servants, smiling during their walks through the snow-covered gardens. Not once had she given him reason to doubt her. The fault belonged entirely to him. For years he had believed caution protected people from heartbreak. Now he understood that distrust could destroy love far more effectively than any betrayal. The lesson arrived too late. Or so he feared. The following morning another revelation emerged. One of Lady Beatrice's former attendants confessed everything. The jealous noblewoman had manipulated conversations, spread false stories, and deliberately fueled suspicion surrounding. Confronted with evidence, Lady Beatrice could no longer deny her actions. Her deception became public knowledge. The scandal ruined her standing among the local nobility. Meanwhile, his uncle faced consequences of his own. Witnesses exposed his mistreatment of his niece. His greed became impossible to hide. At last, the lies collapsed beneath the weight of truth. Yet victory brought Alexander no comfort. The woman he loved remained gone. The realization struck him with startling clarity. Loved. For months he had avoided the word. Now there was no denying it. He loved, not because she was beautiful, though she undoubtedly was. Not because she possessed mysterious connections to his family's past. He loved her because she transformed every place she entered. Because she saw goodness in people who had forgotten it existed. Because she remained compassionate despite years of suffering. Because she trusted him when he had not deserved that trust. The moment he accepted the truth, only one decision remained. He had to find her. Winter tightened its grip across the countryside. Villages disappeared beneath fresh snow. Roads became difficult to travel. Still, Alexander began searching. He visited every nearby town. He questioned merchants, innkeepers, farmers, and travelers. Days turned into a week. Then another. Each lead ended in disappointment. Despite exhaustion, he refused to stop. The servants watched him leave before dawn and return after dark. Mrs. recognized the determination in his eyes. It was the look of a man fighting for something more valuable than pride. Then another storm arrived. The snowfall rivaled the blizzard from the night he first met. Most people sought shelter. Alexander mounted his horse. He remembered finding her alone in a forest during a storm. Perhaps fate would guide him once again. The journey proved difficult. Wind howled across open fields. Snow reduced visibility to mere yards. Yet he continued onward. Near sunset, he reached a small village beside a frozen river. A local woman mentioned a young lady helping poor families at an old chapel beyond the hill. Hope surged through him. He immediately rode toward the location. The chapel appeared through the storm like a beacon. Light glowed from its windows. Alexander dismounted and approached slowly. Through the glass he saw her. Stood beside a table distributing food and blankets. Several children surrounded her. She smiled as she spoke with them. The sight stole his breath. Even after everything she had endured, she still devoted herself to helping others. Nothing had changed the goodness within her. For a moment he simply watched. Then looked up. Their eyes met. The smile vanished from her face. Silence filled the chapel. The children sensed the tension and gradually drifted away. When they were finally alone, neither spoke. Months of emotion seemed trapped between them. Alexander took a cautious step forward. His voice carried more vulnerability than he had ever allowed anyone to hear. She remained still. I have been searching for you. A flicker of emotion crossed her features. Why? The question contained no bitterness, only sadness, because she genuinely did not know. Alexander swallowed hard. Because I was wrong. The admission echoed through the quiet room. I should have trusted you. Lowered her gaze. The wound remained visible despite the passing weeks. I trusted you completely. I know. Regret filled every word. And I betrayed that trust. For a man accustomed to authority, the confession required enormous humility. Yet he continued. I allowed fear to overcome reason. Listened silently. The rumors never matched the woman I knew. His voice trembled slightly. The problem was never your loyalty, it was my lack of faith. Tears gathered in her eyes. Alexander stepped closer. Then, to her astonishment, he dropped to one knee. Not as a duke, as a man seeking forgiveness. I have replayed that night in the library countless times. Snow tapped softly against the chapel windows. You asked why I doubted you. His expression reflected genuine remorse. I had no answer because there was none. His heart tightened. Every word sounded sincere. I loved you then. The confession hung between them. I simply lacked the courage to admit it. Her breath caught. Alexander looked directly into her eyes. I think I loved you from the moment I found you hiding behind that fallen log. Emotion overwhelmed him. You changed my life. The chapel fell silent once more. For several long seconds she said nothing. The pain of his betrayal remained real. Trust once broken could not be restored instantly. Yet she also saw the sincerity before her. The arrogance she often associated with noblemen was absent. Only honesty remained. Slowly she knelt beside him. Tears slipped down her cheeks. You hurt me. I know. I never expected that from you. His expression tightened. I know. She studied him carefully. Then she noticed something she had never seen before. Fear. Not fear for himself. Fear of losing her forever. At that moment she understood how deeply he regretted his mistake. Forgiveness did not erase the past, but it allowed a future to exist. Finally she reached for his hand. Alexander stared at their joined fingers. Hope returned to his eyes. I forgive you. Relief washed across his face with such intensity that it nearly brought tears to his own eyes. The storm outside gradually began to weaken. Several weeks later, Blackwood Manor welcomed them home. This time the atmosphere felt entirely different. The servants celebrated its return with genuine joy. Mrs. openly cried. For the first time, no longer felt like a guest. She belonged. 1 month later, friends, servants, and townspeople gathered in the manor's grand hall. Alexander stood before them all. Remained beside him. The same woman he had once carried through a snowstorm. The same woman he nearly lost because of doubt. He turned toward her. A warm smile touched his face. The day I found you in the forest, I made a promise. Remembered every word. Alexander gently took her hands. I told you I would take you home, but not as my Duchess. Soft laughter spread through the hall. His eyes never left hers. I was wrong. Then he knelt once more and presented a ring. Will you marry me? Tears filled his eyes. The answer came instantly. Yes. Applause erupted throughout the room. Months later they married beneath falling snow. Became the Duchess of Blackwood not because of title or beauty, but because of the strength, kindness, and loyalty that defined her character. Together they built a life founded on trust rather than fear. Years later, whenever winter storms arrived, they often stood together by the manor window watching snow drift across the gardens. Those quiet moments reminded them both of an important truth. Love could survive hardship. Love could survive distance. Love could even survive painful mistakes. But the moment someone tested the loyalty of a faithful heart, They risked losing the greatest gift they had ever been given. Fortunately for Alexander, forgiveness had arrived before that loss became permanent, and the woman he never expected became the Duchess he could never imagine living without.